Hi, I'm Joe Tolles. Growing up in the foster care system, working within it, and single-handedly raising 8 teens adopted from the foster care system has given me a unique view into that world. My reputation for working to keep children connected, healthy, and happy with families who love them is important to me. Who I am today is a far cry from what my circumstances might have dictated. To start, I had to navigate my own childhood hurdles to become the athlete, father, and therapist I am today. Together with child advocate specialist Renee and our guest, I will highlight the issues that impacted me on my journey, issues that are most likely impacting children and families today. Join us as we examine my first steps out of the starting blocks and into the race. Resetting, rebuilding, persevering. Sometimes life does not offer us a clean restart. There is no button to erase what we have been through or to rush us past the hard parts. What we are given instead is a moment to pause, to breathe, and to decide how we move forward. For some, that pause is grounded in faith. For others, it is shaped by therapy, reflection, or the slow work of healing. For many, it's both. Resetting does not mean pretending nothing happened. It means acknowledging what we have carried. The losses, the stress, the health challenges, the emotional weight, and then choosing to respond with intention rather than avoidance. Perseverance is not always visible. It does not always look like confidence or certainty. Sometimes perseverance is simply staying present, showing up to the day when anxiety, grief, or doubt feels heavy. Sometimes it is trusting that healing is possible, even when faith feels fragile and progress feels slow. Rebuilding happens quietly. It happens in therapy rooms and in moments of prayer, in honest conversations and uncomfortable truths, in learning when to push forward and when to rest, and in recognizing that rest itself can be an act of care and faith. None of this happens alone. Our mental health affects the people we love. Our beliefs, whether rooted in faith, values, or lived experience, shape how we treat one another, especially when life is hard. So the question becomes this: not only how do I keep going, but how do we help each other keep going? What does it look like for families to make space for honesty instead of silence, for friends to offer presence instead of solutions, for colleagues to lead with compassion instead of assumptions? Today's conversation invites us to reflect on our role in that work, not with pressure to be perfect, but with permission to be human, to care for our mental health while honoring what gives us meaning and hope, to rebuild together our small corners of the world in ways that allow us to breathe a little easier.
So, Joe, hearing that back after reading it with you last week, first thing that jumped out at me that I wrote down today was looked for the button for so long to erase the past. And my internal self said, oh, how many times I've looked for that button just to erase the past. When I think about some of the things that happened in my early childhood and then even into my adolescence and path that I've been on into my adulthood. But I remember thinking, I just want this to go away. I just want to erase this. So hearing that back for today's podcast, that's the first thing that really hit me was how often, especially in my younger years and into my teens, before I had the knowledge of that there's help out there, that someone will listen, that there are resources. I spent so much energy looking for that button to erase the things that had happened to me as a child, but then also how I became a contributor to that, those circumstances in some cases, and things that I wanted to erase about my choices as well. So that really, that hit me in that punched me right in the gut today, Joe. It did.
Well,
Of
I didn't mean for it to be such a gut punch, but I think you talked about a couple of things that I think are just human nature, right? It's like I think it's human nature to want to move away from the things that we find unpleasant, or we don't want to tolerate, or we have no tolerance for it. And while you were responding just now, I thought, well, wow, because I often talk about my childhood, about sort of the dial, the 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 numbness that was built from my experiences, that the button, right, to turn down the
yeah,
impact of those things. So I think, when I wrote this, it wasn't really considering the conscious action of finding that button, but the unconscious buttons that get pressed when we are stressed or traumatized, the things that just shut off. And you know, I think this is about, for me, awareness, about the ability to control, be part of, planning our course of action, for the benefit of our mental health and the world around us. I think I'm finding it very difficult to see that. Obviously I have a private practice and I deal with this all the time. But outside of the practice, where people are intentionally working on sort of the resetting, the persevering, I don't,
mhm,
it's hard to recognize it in the world when I was forced to look. So the question is I don't know if part of what I felt about all of those things was actually present and I just had rose-colored glasses on. But
right,
now that I have to look, and I'm being forced to look at the world and the people around me in such different ways, just because of the temperature in our society, I am confused, like I think a lot of people. Like I can't get over the fact that I don't recognize the world, right? And so with that sort of feeling of being lost in the woods, what do I do to sort of manage my way, navigate my way? And not just me. How do I help my clients? How do I help my children? How do I help my neighbors navigate the way through the world? Because we I often see surprise on people's face when something as simple as holding the door open. Like it's a nice surprise, but
right,
nobody takes those niceties for granted any longer.
right. Well, I think the other thing too that you said throughout in the beginning was, and you just mentioned it again, was setting those intentions or that intentions rather than versus avoidance. I think that's how it was set
Right.
in there, and how that also has come into play in my life as I've grown spiritually, mentally, emotionally, all of the things that it's so important to have that intention versus that avoidance. And being able to look at the world, as hard as it is right now, but look at the world and see what's going on and put ourselves in places and spaces with like-minded people and supportive people and our circle of people to help with those intentions and seeing that clearly as well. Like I feel it's
Hmm.
so important to have that little community around you, whether it be small, large, whatever. It could be a handful of people, but just to have those pivotal people and supportive people in your life help you set those intentions rather than be avoidant, if that
We,
makes sense.
it makes all the sense in the world, but do you know what has to happen first?
What has to happen first, Joe?
We have to look at ourselves. And so there has to be an acknowledgement. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we share is that we, as difficult as it may be sometimes, we force ourselves or we put ourselves in positions that help us force uh, to look at our truths, our flaws, our fears, our prejudices, and what we've done, I think, to some extent, and of course, there's no perfection in this, is we've acknowledged those flaws, the dents, I'll call them.
Oh, I love that.
We acknowledge
I've
our
acknowledged my dents.
right, because we can't choose, right, a pair of shoes if we don't measure our feet, right? So if it, it's a it's a process of really looking at yourself before you can look at somebody else honestly. You have to look at yourself honestly. And we've got some things that have happened in our past. I mean, this certainly flows into the whole identity formation. We are the people we are because of our life experience.
Right.
But if we try to pretend that that life experience didn't happen, wasn't there, how can we be true to ourselves? How can we move forward if we don't acknowledge that I was hurt or that I hurt somebody or I made mistakes or I did this wonderful thing? To be able to acknowledge all of that, good, bad, and the ugly, only gives us the power to then be, this is who I am, like pure spiritual beings, right? We then have the power to go outside of ourselves and hopefully have a positive impact on the world around us. Yeah.
Well, with that being said, I think yes, we do have to look within. And boy, have I looked within for lots of years. And when I started, I have, and it's not an easy task, but and as we go along in this conversation today, and I had mentioned that, what, I remember looking for that button to erase, to erase, to erase the past of so many different things. But I've also heard myself saying as an adult as well, had it not been for everything that I had gone through, I would not be able to carry the understanding, compassion, um, all of the things that matter within us. I wouldn't have all of that, or the insight, or the connection that I have, and where my passion lies, and how that even though some of those, a lot of the majority of things that you want to erase that happened in my life that were traumatic, that changed who I was and shifted who I was, and yes, my identity formation and all of the things. But had I not been through all of those things, the good, bad, the ugly, I wouldn't be who I am today. And there's a huge part of me inside of me that I really love who I've become today and what I stand for and what I want to be purposeful in and what I want my intentions being moving forward. With that being said, I didn't do any of that alone.
Well, right. And what you said is true. We are who we are based on the experiences that we've lived. There's a difference, though, in there are those people who can be reflective on those things and move forward, and then there's those people that get stuck. So when I am confronted with somebody, either a client or somebody, just a stranger or even a friend who presents to me sort of a limited view of whatever the situation may be or the world, I often ask myself, wow, how are they built? Like what
Mm.
happened? What happened to them?
What
And
happened to them? I was
right.
just going to say that. What happened to them?
But there's it but it's not in terms of judgment, it's of respect, right? We're not going to know everybody's story, and I don't suggest that people go around telling everybody all their deep dark secrets. But we need to acknowledge that people are have been built. Their experiences have built them into the people that they are today. Some people manage that a whole lot easier than others. But the harder part is when we meet somebody who's like our complete opposite. Being patient and acknowledging doesn't mean embracing, right? But acknowledging that.
Right,
And so in that, the process that you talked about is selecting people that would reinforce your journey or your I'll call it that. We also decide who's not going to go on that journey with us.
right.
Right.
But
Um,
I also think too, Joe, for me, that because of my life and the path that I was on and the events that happened in my life too, is that I'm very quick to try to not judge so quickly when I'm presented with that or faced with that because of some of the choices and decisions that I made in my life that were a total reflection of my own mental health and my mental illness that I was battling through and trying to accept and understand. And yeah, so
right.
I hope that I hope that I'm able to do that better than I have been in the past because boy, if you didn't align with me, then I didn't even want you in front of me. Right? I just didn't. It was an instant cutoff, and now I do look at people differently and and I tell myself everybody's got a story, and we don't know what that story looks like. And a lot of times, a lot of the stories that I have heard throughout my career have not been real positive. They've been hard stories to read and hard stories to work through with people. And I specifically reflect to the youth that I worked with for so many years in the residential placement that I worked with. And, knowing that I had that connection without even sharing that connection with them, that I understood what trauma looked like and abuse looked like and neglect looked like. So I think that I try to do the best that I can when I'm faced with that kind of challenge or difference in another human being and their thoughts and words and just what their life is like and their opinions on things. I try not to judge so quickly as I normally had done in the past.
Well, can't you acknowledge that you have sort of mastered that to some degree? Because
Yes,
those kids that, still call you after years of being in
yes,
care, and myself included, um, they recognized exactly what you're talking about. This is not boastful. It's just that, I mean, my brother called me yesterday, and he has a friend who used to work for me at a summer camp, And I don't know, gosh, 40 something years later, maybe 50 years later, she decides to tell my brother what a good spirit I was, that I made her feel better going to work, even though the work was difficult. So my brother hung up with her immediately and called to tell me that she had said that.
Ah,
And that is certainly the person that I want to be, right? I what I told my brother is that, you know, yes, I understand that. As I got older, I understood the way that I impacted the world. I said, but I didn't think of myself that way when I was either 17 or 18 at the time. And I didn't recognize those traits or that ability that that she was telling him. I remember when Facebook first became a thing and people were reaching out to me and they were saying things about me that I had learned about myself in my adulthood. And I was surprised. It was like, you know, almost to like it was always there.
right.
Things that I
Mm,
thought I developed into, I had already been that person, but I wasn't able to recognize that.
right. So often we're not.
Well, and that's, obviously, we work a lot with foster kids, and so I was a foster kid. I was in foster care for 21 years. And so no matter what any good thing anybody said to me, there was a strong doubt in my head that any of that could be true.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
I completely understand that too. Mm,
and so, you know, we've spent our lifetimes trying to make the world better for kids by listening and understanding, accepting. We always say, I do for sure, and I think I've heard you say this, is like, there's no story that can ever surprise you. There's nothing
right.
that the kids can tell you that, sometimes it does happen though. But, um, and, but I think what we do is part of who we are. It's so easy to acknowledge and accept the faults of a child. And not even faults is not the word, but let me just faults and their their experience, and we'll have compassion and empathy for that.
Right.
Sometimes I struggle with adults when I'm confronted with an adult, and I mean confronted, not somebody that I'm working with or somebody that I have a real hard time going to that place first. The place that I go when I work with children or kids, I just it's just harder. Like,
Yeah.
the things that go in through my mind are, you should know better. Why are you in my way? Like, you're an ass. Like, whatever it is. Um,
Say, get real, Joe. What are you really thinking?
well, but those are the immediate responses. Now, I would hope that that's not seen, although I've been told I really can't hide a secret on my face. So, so
Right. Yeah,
I'm
I have that problem either. I can't fix my face either.
yeah, I'm very readable, but it takes time. Well, and it's because I think in my experience, when I'm confronted by those sort of situations from an adult, it's because I'm trapped.
Hmm.
It's usually a confrontation, and I don't have the time to step back and think.
Right.
Not that I react any differently. I can be very dismissive. And I think one of the things that you just said in everything that you said is that sort of that initial reaction, that first impression, sometimes just slams the door. It's like,
Yeah.
sorry, sorry, you're not getting through it. But you know, I also have friends who I've slammed. That initial reaction was a door slam because I
Right.
took time to understand. Not that I intentionally did it, right? Because the door was slammed, but either I was forced to work with them or to hear them and see them. And it took time for me to understand how they were built. Like there were things that sort of explained it. Um, and so there's lots of different opinions and well, we know that now for sure. But they didn't come from nowhere, right?
Right.
Some people are haven't experienced you know differences. Some people haven't um, learned about it, and whatever it is, like the differences, and we're talking about economic differences, racial difference, religious difference, and what we've been told and what we've been part of who we are, which we fought of. We went against our training, maybe in a lot of ways. But most people are brought up to and they're trained to be sort of the person that they are. And it takes a lot to separate yourself from that nuclear family or that wherever you're getting that
Yes.
information to pull away and to say, hey, I want to be different because it's human nature to want to belong. And so, it's the times when we're put in situations where we have to step back and hopefully step back and think.
Yeah. Wow, that was a lot. There was a lot going through my head when you were saying that. Like I was thinking about my family and I was thinking about, coworkers and thinking, wow, yeah. Um,
We
I
we
slammed some door. I've slammed some doors. I
Yes.
have. I've slammed some doors.
I mean, and
That
it's
is for sure.
and that's a good thing to understand and to
Yeah.
know. Up,
Yeah.
I just slammed my door because they went there. Either they said something or did something or their facial expression sent me a message and I just slammed the door on them.
Yeah. And as you were talking, as I was thinking about that, I'm like, I don't know if I really slam. And I'm like, please, Renee, you slam doors. Believe me.
Oh yeah, you
You
do.
slam doors.
We we
I have slammed a lot of doors.
we all slam
Um,
doors, right? And
we
it's
do.
it's a good thing to acknowledge again that's maybe a fault of ours. It could be a defense mechanism. It could be a memory from somebody who's hurt us.
And
Um,
as you were talking, that's what I was thinking. And I was thinking about those scenarios in my head of when I've slammed the door. I love that. When I slammed the door, and it was even into my adulthood, I have recognized that so many things trigger me from even my childhood that I thought, well, I spent years in therapy. I've dealt with that and I've done. Then when I've slammed that door and have to step back and reflect, like, why did I react the way that I just reacted? Because this is not their shit, it's mine.
right.
It's mine. Because they were just being who they are, and I was being who I was by slamming the door at the time. But as I stepped back and really reflected on that and looked at that and thought, well, damn, that was my trigger. That was something that came from my past that, ooh, didn't know that that was still there. So, hearing you talk about that, I do have to be mindful of those sometimes. And I know that when I'm going through some stuff, because we all go through our stuff, that's when it's more heightened that I'm going to slam that door more often because I'm in that vulnerable spot of either hurt or going through something. And those are when my little triggers or my things come up that are so much more easily set off. And
That-
as you were talking, I'm thinking, because when you first said slam the door, I'm like, wait, I'm not a door slammer. And then I'm thinking, oh,
I
I've
beg to
slammed a
differ.
lot of doors. I've slammed doors in advocating for youth and having judge say you have to leave my courtroom because I was advocating for this child very loudly and very clearly. Um, yeah. So I like that, and I'm going to think of that now when I'm faced with that again, and how hard I'm going to slam it if I'm going to slam the door at all.
And pride gets in the way, right? It gets in the way of trying to crack the door back open to take a second look. Um, we're living in a society today where there's less processing of feelings and emotions and facts, and it's more about winning. And so, when I have a confrontation with somebody, I try very hard not to think about winning, right?
Right.
And there's some people that make it very difficult for you to, in that case, quote unquote, lose because
Right. Well, it's the same. It's not having to be right, but and how I've done that in my brain, Joe, is like I don't have to be right, and I can be kind about it while I don't have to be right. And those are the two things that I've had to kind of bring together. Like, do you really? I don't have to be right, and I can tell my brain, you know what? I can just be kind.
right.
I can just be
Well, and
kind.
sometimes that's just too difficult, right? You got to admit that. And things that get in the way of sort of the artificial things that get in the way are titles. Like the artificial, like, well, I am so and so, or I have this degree, or I have more money than you, so I get to win. I get to decide
Right.
on many things that, like, I can't have I can't like but we're there. We're there in the society today, right? And I suggest, at least for myself, it's easier to step away from that and not have any caring or worry about what they think. Like,
Right.
those are people who want to win, right? It's like, it's okay.
Yeah.
There in there is, I think, for me, a healthy door slam. All right, I
Yeah.
had enough of
Oh,
that.
absolutely. There's
I'm
healthy
just
door slams. I agree.
I'm just taking my ball and going home. It's like,
Right. I agree.
I'd rather them sit there in the emptiness, or the the idea that they have won, than to drag myself, because that has an impact on me. If
Absolutely.
I'm in a bad mood, my vibrations are bad for people that I care about and people that I don't want to, right? And if I'm happy, then those I hold doors open for people and I smile at people and I say things, right? And so, and that reaction from people to sort of my positive energy is much more important for me than the opposite of that.
Well, it sounds like we just took care of that whole resetting thing. That's what we're doing, right? It is. I'm
Well,
serious. That's what we're doing. We're
well,
resetting.
we,
In
you
our
know,
brains, we are. We're
yeah,
resetting. And
but
in that resetting, go ahead, Joe.
no, I'm just saying that, us discussing resetting and us being able to do it, is really an example, right? I acknowledge, and I think that you would too, that for some people, there's too much heaviness that prevents them from being able to do that simply, or it's too complicated for them to do because of the situations that they were given. Um, and
Right.
so, sure, you and I are always probably going to leave with like an agreement that, okay, we're going to go out there and reset. It's more difficult.
It
Well,
is.
we
And
know we
as you
were
say that,
even with the kids we've worked with, they're
yeah, even with
so
the
they're
adults
so
that we work with, even with
well.
the adults that we work
but
with.
but the kids, more importantly, without a found they that the adults at least have a foundation, right? That there's an explanation. Maybe not our issue. Maybe we're not going to have any impact. But how many kids have we tried to help reset and they're lost in that field of hopelessness? They don't know how, they don't trust it.
Too many.
And so I think just for everybody, one of the things that I like to be is just an example. Like I'm not a teacher per se, even though I love to teach, but
Mhm.
as an example, like look at him do that. Look at how he's doing that. Maybe I can do that. You know, we we don't put enough importance, I think, anymore on role models. And you don't have
And
you don't okay, and
yeah,
I just not imposed titles of role model,
right, right,
but it's important for me to be a role model of how I would like people to treat me, right? So
right. Yeah. And how many of the kids that we have worked with and have crossed our paths had no clue of even what that looks like, sounds like, or feels like. Um, yeah.
I'd love
Mm.
to hear what other people think, and I'm hoping if they're finding anything that resonates in this conversation, that they might leave us messages at the website joetolls.com, and
Yeah.
maybe we can have some backstage conversations with folks about how you reset and um, you know rebuild and persevere and all the
Yeah, I
things.
would be open for those conversations too. I would love to continue this conversation. It's a good one to have.
I think we all should be having these conversations. I'm certainly having these conversations with my clients.
Yeah,
But there's such important conversations for people. But there's some vulnerability that has to be accepted in part of these conversations.
I agree.
Acknowledging that you may not know, you may not understand. Um, and the way that we can, I think, understand is by listening and talking to each other.
I agree 100%, Joe. Thank you for having this conversation with me. I always enjoy it so much. You always do something to trigger something else for me to think of or step back and go, you know what, you really need to look at that. So I do. I appreciate these conversations, and we do welcome others to come in and have conversations with us as well. Of
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for being part of this. Um,
course.
you have been listening to Out of the Starting Blocks and Into the Race. I'm Joe Tolles, and with Renee Damon. And remember that the baggage that you carry through your life becomes a lot lighter when you make room for help.